I think the part of me that is interested in research has also found that if you are able to do deep work on the field, on the ground, and understand what people on the ground want to do or want to change, um, there is a lot of innovation happening at the grassroots. Can we bring in those narratives back onto through the institutions that we work with? Like, for example, I think some of the things that you all are doing through your podcast is bringing some of those stories to a much wider audience. So how do we use the institutional mechanisms that we have to bring the innovation that is happening deep at the interior in a big way?
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Anahita Speaker Series presented by Carnegie India, celebrating stirring stories of empowerment, struggle, and success from women professionals in different fields across the globe. Stories we hope are bound to inspire young professionals. I'm Kanika Monga, Senior Coordinator, Partnerships and Strategy at Carnegie India. Today, I'm delighted to host and welcome Dr. Poornima Dore. Dr. Poornima Dore is a practicing economist driving impact through finance, innovation, and digital transformation. She is a trusted advisor for leaders, CXOs, funds, and institutions keen on rigor, long-term impact, and last-mile delivery. Having spent several years as part of the prestigious TAS across sectors and as the former director at the Tata Trusts, having led several on-ground initiatives, she is a strong advocate of growth with equity. She is well published in her field with her recent book, Regional Economic Diversity, drawing critical acclaim. She teaches at prestigious Management and Technical Institute and is a visiting professor at XLRI, recognized as one of the top 100 analytics leaders in South Asia. We're delighted to host you today, ma'am, and I look forward to an insightful conversation.
Thank you so much, Kanika. Great to be here, especially as Carnegie India has been one of the institutions that when I was at the Tata Trust, we had the opportunity to be part of its inception itself. So it's a great privilege to be here. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for making the time. So I'll start, ma'am, with my first question. I would like to begin by asking about your journey and why you chose to pursue economics as a domain and the impact space in particular.
To be very honest, economics has been a subject that I have liked a lot as a student, but I never actually thought it would end up becoming an integral part of my career. In my early days, I think my lowest score was in economics in my class 10 and class 12. And when I wanted to pursue my bachelor's in economics, I remember my parents asking me, why don't you choose accounts or commerce? Even the science subjects, I would score very high on them. But for some reason, as a discipline, I have always found economics to be very fascinating because it's this multi-headed hydra. I think it explains individual choice. Why do we choose something over another? Why does the government choose to invest in defense or healthcare? Why do businesses make certain choices? So I think the whole realm of choice is something which economics describes very beautifully. And I was also perhaps fortunate to have some very good teachers in my growing up years that drew me to the subject. So though my bachelor's was in economics, I went ahead to do an MBA. And during my MBA days, I would keep thinking about how I could get back to economics in some way or have it back in my life. And so then many years later, once I was in the world of work, um, so my mother says economics is like that one boyfriend you're not able to forget. You keep you keep finding a way to at least mentally reconnect with it. So it's been, I think, a journey of then thinking of doing a PhD alongside my job and somehow getting it back to play a role. So yeah. And to the second point about impact, I think
Mhm.
when development economics, when I used to study about it during my undergrad days, there's so much about how India is growing or how the other countries are performing and what that means for questions of healthcare, access, identity. And I think my experience in the world of work as a business person within the Tata Group also made me see that these things actually come together a lot more than how our work defines it or how our disciplines define it. So, looking at impact in the entire continuum between what business can do and various other ecosystem players has been something that I have actively sought in my, professional journey. It's not been easy because I think around 2004-5 when I started exploring this space, it was very nascent. Today, impact is a much more thought of as a field. It's still evolving. I think it is early days, but I've been grateful to have been part of the evolution of this space and to have grown with it.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much for explaining how your trajectory and how you worked in different areas. So just continuing on from that, you've pursued a career across various fields, so business, government, philanthropy, and academia. How did you kind of juggle so many roles, and which one gave you the most professional satisfaction, or still does?
So each one has unfolded at a different point in time. I joined the Tata Group, and during my time in my business roles, I have had the chance to work with CEOs, CXOs, look at their own how I was handling structured investments at Tata Capital. And my remit was pan India to help companies think of how finance and capital would help them in their growth journey. I was also fortunate to have a boss who early on gave me a lot of responsibility, and this was, in a sense, Tata Capital was a startup within the overall Tata ecosystem. And one thing I would say in making choices like these is I think at every point there have been these questions about, isn't it better to take a safer option versus trying out something new? I think as a TAS person within the Tata ecosystem, also, the first question was that, why don't you join one of the established Tata Group companies like a Tata Steel, Tata Motors, etc. Tata Capital is still setting out early days. You don't know how your career is going to shape up. Start on one of these organizations which has a solid footing. I think very good advice. But I also think I was in the zone of wanting to look at how nation building can tie up with my professional work. And I felt that the SME and the infra businesses of Tata Capital was where the opportunity, the role had presented itself. And Govind, who was then the CFO, coming in as CFO, said, Poornima, why don't you come in for this role? So I took a chance. And I think it was a very interesting time to. I weighed the odds, I think, but a lot of these, Kanika, would be serendipity where you choose a certain role and then the role unfolds into many more things. And I was traveling a lot. And during that time, I also felt that while there is so much happening in this ecosystem, what more can capital do? That journey made me also then come back and see, okay, the Tata Trusts is a place where uh, at a group center, this is the holding entity of the Tata Group, and it has an impact across various sectors in many ways. And I happened to be the first TAS person who actually expressed to the board that I would want to do a move, an internal transfer to the Tata Trust. It took almost a year and a half for that transition to actually happen. And I would say that it needed some patience, persistence, follow up from my side, but also the vision, the thinking of some of the leaders who saw merit in my interest and who gave me that opportunity to, come in. Mr. Krishna Kumar, I remember, was on the board. And Mr. Tata himself has been very gracious on many occasions in um, giving me space to come up with new and different ideas in the trust ecosystem. So some of the new things that we were able to drive and deliver were on migration, urbanization, on how we had a large program on data driven governance, which has been the first of its kind actually in India, where a philanthropy decides to allocate some part of its capital to building the early parts of what later grew into MOSIP, into digital identity. And so then that brought in partnerships with the Gates Foundation, with Omidyar Network. um, we've also built, I think, the part of me that is interested in research has also found that if you are able to do deep work on the field, on the ground, and understand what people on the ground want to do or want to change, um, there is a lot of innovation happening at the grassroots. Can we bring in those narratives back onto through the institutions that we work with? Like, for example, I think some of the things that you all are doing through your podcast is bringing some of those stories to a much wider audience. So how do we use the institutional mechanisms that we have to a bring the innovation that is happening deep at the interior in a big way? Two, how does one help that to scale? And in that, I have found the benefit of building partnerships with academia, because academia can come in with research, with the student community, with that part of the strength that it has. Government is by far the largest investor in this space. So building bridges with government and looking at what are some of those things we can do together. I have a lot of respect for the IAS fraternity and government stakeholders in other countries as well, because it's a hard job. Service delivery in these large organizations are not easy to do. And there is a huge role that private sectors and people outside the government have to build that bridge. And the fourth anchor, I would say, is civil society and communities themselves, and how can you play a glue in bringing all of that together? So a lot of my work, one by one after the other, has been about exploring these different ecosystems, building partnerships where we can design programs together, and having a last mile effect, but with the strength of what corporates, government, and academia can also bring to make that last kind of lasting change happen.
So I'll move to a little lighter side of your life. I'm fascinated to learn that you're also a musician and a drummer. How do these personal passions complement your professional life, and how does creativity play a role in your success?
Kanika, once I think around in my early years of my career, I had stopped playing music altogether. I used to do that a lot during my college days, and even on my campus, we had a band called the Bodhi Tree. This is XLRI's band, and we have some very interesting songs to our credit. Uh, if you have heard of GMD or Sabka Katega, very irreverent and nothing to do with the world of economics and policy kind of music. Um, and so a lot of that, I think, has fueled both my friendships and also the fact that I think music opens up your mind in many ways. But there were many years in between where I was completely out of touch with music, and somewhere around 2010-11 is when there was this life uh, vision planning exercise that I was part of in a workshop. And when I was doing that life, you normally do visioning exercises for the company or for the organization you're with. This was a life vision exercise for yourself. And when I was doing that exercise, there were two things that, over time came to me. And I believe a lot in journaling and writing down what you're thinking about at any point of time, when you have to make a big decision, when you have to make a choice, even when you have to make hiring decisions within your team. How are you going to expand work? For me, a lot of that process happens when I'm, kind of, you do ideation with people also, but some of the core things happen when you're reflecting yourself and noting it down, some of that. So two things which stood out for me. One was this, that I want development economics to be part of whatever I do, whether I'm wearing a corporate hat, whether I'm wearing it's the PhD hat, whether it's, engaging with any of these 4 5 stakeholders that we spoke about. How do you look at impact, and how do you use some of the principles of development economics to make that happen? So a very geeky part of the vision statement, I will admit. But since I have at the start of this discussion itself told you about how much I love the subject, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The second part was music, where I felt that, music somehow in my life has to feature. It'll be a huge this life won't be worth it if I don't have it, in some way. And so I have to make time for it, or find some simple ways to integrate it. So two things which I did after that was that, I uh, my one of my aunts actually was learning from one of the music teachers in Bombay, Mrs. Alumelu Mani. Now, Alumelu Mani ma'am is Hariharan's mother, the singer Hariharan's mother. And so she introduced her to me, my aunt Geeta Dore. And so once I met her, she teaches very selectively, but because I had learnt in the past, she was kind enough to, teach me. So she used to stay about 10 minutes, 10 15 minutes from my place, is what I discovered. So we arrived at a cadence where I would go to her place in the morning at 7:30, 7:30. We would have a class early in the morning after a cup of coffee, and then I would go to office. And so gradually got back into the regular rhythm of, singing. Drumming and percussion has been something that I am very passionate about, but drumming is something which is hard to do when you don't have your band with you. So that is something, but we have in the more recent years been getting back together as a band, finding ways to jam when we meet. At home we have some get-togethers where, I think we are blessed to have some friends who are very musically inclined. So my house is the hub where a lot of that coming together, jamming and all of that happens. And these days my daughter finds it very exciting, so she's trying her hands at my drum kit. So no pressure on her, but I'm glad that, slowly and in some form we are finding ways to bring music in our lives and keep it alive. We had a great show at in on a couple of campuses in the last 2 years, where my
Yeah.
band has got back together from different places. So it's been nice to keep it going.
That's very nice. When we do this speaker series, also, of course, we're inspiring women to make a career and to follow their passions in the career space. But I think it's very important to also remind them that we have to look after ourselves and, look out for ourselves in the life of work, family balance. It just stays there. It's so important to do what we like to do, which is what I think a lot of women in their 30s just don't have the time for. But if there is, that motivation is there, it can happen. And I think that might, make the rest of your life also better.
That's
So
very, very,
I
very,
think this is one of the most inspiring things that one should pick up from your lives is to actually do something for ourselves.
yeah.
So yeah,
And I would
and
also say that, it has taken me some years to realize that bringing in some of these things, while we may, we need to frame it in terms of what do we want to do, what is it in it, how do we build it for ourselves. I think there are these ripple effects where, in economics we call it unintended consequences, which happen on the people around you. The fact that I have music in my life, I think it brightens up my husband's life and work, my daughter's perspective to things. They look forward to these times when, our house is going to be a hub for
yeah,
some of this. I think it creates a certain zone in which the grandparents, all of them tend to be in when you have some of this also happening in your ecosystem. And I have therefore crossed that. I'm in the process of it. I wouldn't say I'm completely crossed, but I think on some of these, I've crossed the point of thinking that, oh, this is something I have to do for me. I have realized that this is something I need to do for us,
yeah,
and I'm the only one who has to do it.
yeah,
So prioritizing some of this, even I think self care for women,
exactly.
we are doing it for ourselves, but
Mhm.
at some level, we are doing it for us.
Yeah,
And nobody else may see that.
Hmm.
But the day you start seeing it, or the day I start seeing it, and I realize that for us this is very important, then the chance of my prioritizing it becomes much more.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Our self care goes on to the family as well. And I think everybody is just happier. If we are not happy, the family can't be happy.
Absolutely. We can make life miserable for everybody around.
Yes, that's right. Okay, I'll quickly go on to our rapid fire round.
Mm.
So, the economist who inspires you the most.
I think Maria Mazzucato.
A must read book that you'd like to recommend on any topic.
Since we have a much wider audience beyond economics, I'm going to
Yeah,
take something very simple: The Alchemist. A lot of people have read it, but everybody who has read it at a point of time in their life when they were trying to make a transition or trying to think of change, I think this is a go to book. You can read it a number of times. It talks a lot about the universe and how, to think about the whole system of choice. So for me, while economics is a lot about choice, I think this is a very close to heart way of thinking about choice if you read The Alchemist.
okay. If you had to write another book, what would it be on? Again, it doesn't have to do with economics.
I have three book ideas currently in the pipeline, and in my own head, I'm trying to prioritize between them. But yeah, I think I have one which will come at some point of time on women and women in the world of work and what choices mean for a woman's life.
That's amazing. I really look forward to that book.
That's going to take some time, that particular title. I think I would like to collect a few more experiences of myself and the women around me, but it will come.
One habit you believe is essential for achieving success.
Um, Discipline and consistency.
Okay.
Boring, but true.
One word to describe how you manage work life balance.
A phrase, I would use a phrase: zooming in and out.
Okay. Your favorite song to perform.
Oh, this is a song by Steppenwolf called Born to Be Wild.
And lastly, if you had to describe an Indian woman in one word,
I would go with powerful.
lovely.
It's the name of a book written by a friend of mine called, uh, the name of the book itself is Powerful, and the O in the powerful is the picture of a bindi. So Nirupama has written this book, so I think that word resonates with me. I would strongly recommend it to all the women listening as well.
Thank you. So, the last one or two questions. Economics, like many other fields, has been traditionally dominated by men. How do you think that we can increase women's participation? And how important has mentorship been in your particular journey? Any messages that you have for young professionals?
Yes, it is true. I think it is. There are very few. There are now, I think, more and more women coming into this kind of a field. I would actually broaden this to even fields like data, technology, economics. Public policy has had women, but I think in any field, I think decision making roles, we have not had enough women. And whether that's within the Tata Group, whether that's within government, whether even within academia, I think there is a lot of there's a lot that I think we need to do collectively to see more women in leadership. Some steps that I think, and I'm part of this group called, which looks at the Center for Gender Equitable Leadership and Governance at XLRI as well for women, and the broader question of diversity and inclusive leadership. I think we need to have better top leadership selection procedures where we do look at who are the women in the organization whom we need to interview, who must make it at least to the short list. The final decision of who gets the big jobs has to definitely be on merit. I am not somebody who believes in giving somebody a chance out of turn, but I think we need to have our shortlists have to be broader so that we start seeing the women in the organization. We start giving them more concrete feedback about how they can grow, what do they need to do more of. So that's from the organization side of things, from the leadership side of things. For women themselves, I think mentorship has definitely played a big role. I have um, at times reached out to people in the ecosystem, and when I have reached out, I think I've got very sound advice from people who have and sometimes that advice comes outside your immediate organization, and you should look for at least one or two mentors who are in your field but who may not be in your direct line of reporting an organization, because for two very simple reasons: you are able to speak much more freely about your concerns or your worries without a fear of judgment or a fear of how will it reflect in my appraisal or my career progression. It may be that the person in front is going to be very fair and unbiased, and if you find someone like that, that's great. But you should definitely have someone outside who can give a sense of perspective, which can mean, this is not such a big deal, don't worry too much about this. It could also mean this is a problem, you need to address it in this particular way. And it could also mean about opening up avenues outside your immediate ecosystem that you need to be looking at. For example, one of the things which I've been currently doing over the last few years has been to actually do a lot of work within the ecosystem with a different variety of organizations. And I think that means a whole new set of experiences about how you can bring about change, how you can solve for some of this. And that means that this kind of an advisory portfolio that I have currently is a segue or a window to actually be effective in different contexts and to bring what you have learned in a very effective place to a larger set of stakeholders. Writing and teaching for me are other ways where you're actually expanding the pie of the kind of work that can happen, especially because the impact field is something where a lot of entrepreneurship and a lot of thinking and youth action needs to happen. So for all the women who are listening, I think if there is anything that you want to do in the area of impact, whatever your current job is, I think about ways in which you want to. It could be by way of volunteering, it could be by way of reading up or adding to your skill set through an added certification. But choose one or two slices of things you really want to expand your capabilities on. Don't try to do everything. You don't have to sign up for every course on Coursera and then feel that, oh, you're not doing enough. You don't have to go for every networking event to feel that, oh, I have to collect this whole set of visiting cards. I think about, do some reflection helps a lot. So for me, during a time of reflection, writing is my mentor. Writing tells me that, these are three blind spots you didn't have the time to think about. So doing that, talking to one or two, people who get you, who understand you, and who have your best interests in mind, finding that is worthwhile. But three is, of course, partnering with organizations, taking on volunteering assignments. So, for example, I do a set of, as part of the work on the regional economy, there are some of folks who volunteer with me on specific projects. So, volunteering, I find, is a very interesting way of also, expanding what you can do, learning something new, bringing that back to how that will shape your journey. So, three, four of these parameters, I think, are important for young people to think beyond your immediate job role delivery and bring some of these learnings back to your own organization so that you are being seen as someone who's thinking two steps ahead and is always willing to learn and add more and have fun. Yeah, I think more than all of this, it's so important in life. And by having fun, I don't mean just going out for a party and, eating out and all of that. Think of the things that you are naturally good at and which make you feel excited about, and make some time for those things. That could be going for a trek, it could be, spending time in the outdoors. You will have one or two of those things you've loved to do as a child or as a young person with your friends. Think about one or two of those things and make space for that. Automatically the rest will fall in place.
That's great advice. I want to just do one follow up on that. You mentioned journaling and you mentioned writing, and we have a lot of our audience are budding writers. Do you have any suggestions on the writing process and how to go about that that you could just add to this advice?
Yeah. So I think a lot of, if you have ideas about writing, making time for it the first thing in the morning or the last thing at night, depending on whether you're a morning person or a night person. So for example, I'm a morning person. For me, early morning, when there is no disturbance before the household wakes up, that is kind of sometimes the best time for. Or you may have to parcel out times which are good for you, but you need to do that consistently over some time, not kill yourself if the ideas are not flowing, and give it time. So my book, for example, the one on the regional economy, this has taken since when I may have first started, it has taken about it's actually a 10-year effort, but at the start I didn't know it would be a book. It started off as research, it started off as analysis, it started off as a hypothesis that you are building on. But it is only after 2018-19 that it actually started taking the shape of a book. And then it was a 3-4 year process. So some people write very fast and the ideas flow very, very quickly. There is certain kinds of writing which you'll find you're in the flow. So understand what gives you a flow state, and make make some space for that, but build a routine. I think building a routine helps. It's been very hard for me because my daughter was very small, and there was the job, and you're trying to write. These things are sometimes it's a hard juggle. I will not even begin to pretend, Kanika, that it's easy to balance multiple things. So sometimes it's also about prioritizing one thing at one point in time, let it get some traction, and then you come back to it when you are feeling a little more creative or when the ideas begin to flow. So that's what I meant by zooming in and zooming out. So making space in your life for both of these, I think, are very.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. Um, and to our listeners, I'd like to say that please access Carnegie India's YouTube channel for all the Anahita Speaker Series episodes. And see you next month.